Our worst fears have come to pass. The One Ring has revealed itself, and as the Fellowship prepares for its perilous journey to Mount Doom, the shadow of Sauron stretches forth to reclaim it. In ages long past, the Witch King gathered a dark army in Angmar. Once again, he calls a vast horde from the depths of Khand-dûm to march upon the lands of Middle-earth and lay them to waste. Aragorn and I hoped the Rangers alone could hold back the Witch King's advance, and that Angmar's strength had not yet grown too great. We were wrong.
Gosh! Fight!
You must unite the free peoples of Eriador and inspire them to stand against Sauron. For if you do not oppose the army of Angmar, then all the lands of Middle-earth will fall forever into darkness and shadow. War is at hand. The time is now.
Well, I suppose there it is. There you have it. Now you know. Welcome to Lord of the Rings Online Siege of Mirkwood. This is the first video in what I hope to be a series of videos aimed at the absolute total Lord of the Rings Online noob, written and commentated by me, who is an absolute total Lord of the Rings Online noob. I started playing this game, let's say, a week ago, and I'm going to start off making a new character, and I hope to run through a few of the differences that you may have seen or be curious about compared to other MMOs. Mainly World of Warcraft, because that's what I've come from, although I have played an awful lot of other MMOs, going all the way back to 1998 when I was playing on the Great Lakes and Atlantic Shard of Ultima Online. This is even before Ultima Online the Second Age was released, so I've been playing MMOs for quite a few years now. So, without further ado, let's jump right in and start with the basics, your account. Majority of people starting this game for the first time will have a free account. As you can see on my screen here under the word characters, I have a premium account, which is, in all honesty, not much different. It just means I've physically spent some real money on the game. Normally, a free player will only have 2 character slots. It will say, whichever server you pick to start with, it will say 0 of 2 character slots used. I have 0 of 3, it's a bonus. I bought some turbine points during the week, and of course it immediately bumps you up to the next level, which is premium. I don't get anything else for free apart from an increased gold cap to 5 gold rather than 2 gold per character and 1 extra character slot. That is about the only thing I get that's different to free players. I still have to pay turbine points for quest packs, for expansions, for bag slots, trait slots, all this sort of stuff that we'll be going over again in the future. So if you're not premium, don't worry about it too much. It's not a big difference, because I hope that people are going to subscribe, even temporarily, at some point in the future. Bearing in mind, it is free to play, but the more money that go into Turbine's pocket through Lord of the Rings, the more development they can do on Lord of the Rings Online, which makes it a better game for all of us. So guys, put your hand in your pocket, whip out the Visa, buy a $5.99 pack of points from the LOTRO store or something. Every single cent will help these guys build a better game, keep producing content. And there we go. Right, so let's create our first character. And as you can see, we have a possibility of 4 races. Man, dwarf, hobbit and elf, as you would expect, being in Tolkien's universe. You can be male or female in men, hobbits and elves only. If you want to be a female dwarf, I'm afraid, you are straight out of luck. Personally, I wanted to create a female dwarf guardian, but obviously the game doesn't let me. As you can see, click dwarf, the male-female box is gone, so not really going to happen. Right, so we'll select men here for a second, mainly because you can be every single class I have access to at the moment with the race of man. Burglar, Captain, Champion, Guardian, Hunter, Lawmaster and Minstrel. As a free player, these are what you will have access to, unless you physically pay for them using turbine points or subscribing. I'm assuming you get it from subscription as well, don't quote me on that one. You'll get access to the Runekeeper and the Warden. Burglars are essentially your stealth and hide around a bit class. Captains are a support class that buff quite a bit. They have a little guy that follows them, a herald, and buffs might and agility and can do other things at later levels. Champion is great fun actually. It's a dual welding, heavy armor wearing death machine. Has, from what I've read, the best AoE DPS in the game, and having played one at the moment up to about level 35, I think my main one is, I can see why they do an awful lot of damage very quickly. Guardians are your main tanking class in the game, as you can see here. Sword and shield, defensive role, supposedly quite easy to play, but then again, saying that most tanks are. In other games I've played, I found tanking to be stressful but quite easy. Hunters are, well, exactly as the name and the picture suggests, it's a guy with a bow and arrow. You don't get pets in this like you may do in other games, so if you're expecting to get a pet at whatever level, sorry guys, you're flat out of luck with that one. Lawmasters are the ranged caster class. They are probably, and from what I've heard very much so, really good fun at later levels. I've got one at about level 13 or 14 and I'm finding it very hard going. But that could just be me because I'm a very melee centric sort of player. I prefer hitting things with sharp sticks and swords than casting spells at them. Minstrel is the main go-to healer for this game. He whips out a lute or a horn or a harp or a clarinet or whatever instrument you happen to have and plays a tune, and poof, you get health back, which is always good. They also do some pretty impressive damage for a guy with a musical instrument, and I'm not talking about Guns N' Roses style hit him over the head with your guitar. It's very respectable. I've seen a couple of friends of mine playing their minstrels in raids endgame, and it's surprisingly more damage than you'd expect an almost dedicated healing class to do, which make leveling them pretty good fun. Like I say, you do have access to two other classes if you buy them. As you can see, it's denoted here by the little turbine point logo. You have the Warden, which is a defensive class that supposedly does pretty good damage as well. As you can see, has spears and javelins and uses a completely different combat system using something called gambits, but again, I've not played one, so I'm not going to comment on these at all. And the only race the human can't be, which we'll go to a dwarf for, is a Runekeeper, which is a offensive damage caster or an offensive healer. So again, eventually I'll get these unlocked at some point, but not at the moment. What we'll do to start off with, we'll create a man, and we'll create a champion, just for the purposes of going through the customization. I'm going to go over each of the classes themselves for the first few levels in separate videos later on. Before I do that, however, you'll see we've been over the classes. You find each of the races also happens to have different traits, which is something I was meant to mention previously. I managed to forget all about it. Well done. For the race of man, you have 4 specific bonuses or characteristics for the race you choose. It makes no difference whether you're male or female. Females are not weaker, men are not stronger. So again, as you'd expect in a game this day and age, they're identical apart from one's got boobs and one doesn't. The gift of men characteristic is improved fate. If you go back to the books or the films, depending how you came across Lord of the Rings, you hear quite often that the free people, the race of man is due to start the 4th age, with Aragorn obviously retaking the throne of Gondor, so on and so forth. So yes, the diminishing of mankind, they have weaker wills, as you obviously know by the Nazgul. The 9, they were human kings who were dominated by Sauron's rings, thus you have less will, weaker wills. Easily inspired. Increased morale restoration rate. This is a big one for melee. And your morale is what Lord of the Rings Online calls your hit points. So, more morale, more health, good for tanks, good for melee DPS, essentially good for everybody, but those classes mainly. And strong men, improved strength, 15 might, is actually quite a lot early on in the game. You'll find that even up to level 20, the highest bonus you'll get on a specific one specific item, in this case, the first one I think of is weapons. The level 21, I think, crafted one-handed swords only have 10 might on them. So this extra 15 might is almost like an entirely new item slot, giving you full might, which is always good. The dwarfs, sturdiness, plus 15 might, as the humans get, but they also get plus 10 vitality, which is 40 morale, I think. It's 4 morale to 1 point of vitality, I think. And 1% common mitigation. Now, common is a damage type. There are, unlike hitting things with a stick and it does damage, there are common damage, Western S damage, tactical, so on and so forth. It all depends what sort of attack you're doing, what you're doing it to, what sort of weapon you've got, as to what type of damage it does. Majority of everything will be common. So in this case, 1% common mitigation. So pretty good for tanks. Stocky. Obviously, dwarfs are short and fat, so they're not very agile. You lose 8 agility. Not a particularly good one for a hunter or a burglar. Not that you can be a dwarf burglar, but you get the idea. The Lost Dwarf Kingdoms, reduced fate. The dwarf's time in Middle-earth is fading. Obviously with the upcoming up man, so -8 fate. Unwearying in battle. This is actually quite a nice one. You get a bonus to your morale and power regeneration in combat. So when you're fighting something, your health and your inverted commas mana goes up in combat faster, but it goes down slower when you're not in combat, which in all honesty is not a big problem, because if you need to boost it out of combat you can always have trail food or rations, which is always good. And one-handed axe is characteristic, which allows the use of one-handed axes. Not quite sure why that one's on there, but it is. So, hobbits. Small size. Well, that's an obvious one, it's a hobbit. But because they're small, they don't have very much might. So, hobbit tank? Maybe not a good idea. But, countered by this one, hobbit toughness. They may be small, but they're surprisingly tough, so you get an extra 15 vitality. May be good for a tank, who knows? Rapid recovery. Improved morale regeneration out of combat. So this is out of combat only. So when you finish your fight, your health will go up quicker than other races. And Hobbit Courage. 1% fear resistance. There are a lot of fear mechanics in the game, most of which I've not come across yet, obviously because it's a bit further on than I've personally got to. But fear resistance is always nice. You get feared to a certain point, you'll become rooted and you'll cower and you can't do anything, so the more fear you can resist, the better. Resist corruption, shadow mitigation, obviously less damage, we all like. And finally, elves. Sorrow of the Firstborn, you have 20 morale deduction from your maximum, which by the time you get to sort of the 5,000 or 6,000 level, which you'll have at endgame, 20 is not really a problem. You also have -60 non-combat regen. So mainly, as they say here, elves feel things more deeply than the other races and are more subject to sorrow. So minus morale regen. Agility of the woods, improve agility. 15 agility. I think the humans might think this is really good for hunters. So there we go, you get a 15 agility boost off the bat. Fading of the Firstborn. The time of elves in Middle-earth is nearly its end, as I believe Galadriel said in the film, so -8 fate there. And suffer no illness. +4 disease and +4 poison resist rating. The ratings on these I'm not 100% sure on. This is something we'll explore later in the series, but from what I've come across in the starter areas, you get poisoned and diseased quite frequently, so it always helps. Well, there we have it. We will move on to creating. I think we'll create a man, and we'll create a champion, because they're quite easy. I've got one. I know the champion quite well, well, compared to the other races and combos. So we'll start with the champion, and we'll run through the starter areas, and we'll run through the next bit of information, which is probably going to be the LOTRO store and running over the basics of the stats in game in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you all again soon.